Welcome to the Unfiltered Show from the Score Studios. My name is Joseph Casciaro. That's Levi Smith. Levi, how are we doing today?
We're doing all right.
I thought you were going to say we're not doing great after what we witnessed yesterday.
Yeah, that's probably closer to it. I was trying to sugarcoat a little bit. Yeah, not great. Not great at all. I was hoping to be in here without this somber state, but sucks. Sucks a lot.
What Levi's talking about, of course, is Team Canada basketball.
Yes.
Gold medal hopefuls, bronze medalists at the FIBA World Cup, brought an even better team, brought the best team Canada's ever brought to a men's basketball tournament at the Olympics.
Yeah.
Second most NBA talent. And they're going home without even playing for a medal. They didn't even make the medal rounds. They lost their first knockout game to France, 82-73. Let's talk about it. From your vantage point, what the hell went wrong?
Man, it's funny because we were in here, 2-3 weeks ago, talking about everything. And honestly, what I took away from this game is exactly what we talked about with how the States could go down. You know, they have these tiny, tiny flaws, and you look at that, and then you look at this Canada roster. It's just, I said it before, it's the light version of the American team, and they are not talented enough to avoid those flaws, and that's what got to them. Lack of experience, surprise guys on the other side just making noise and doing their thing. And there's a lot that went wrong, but there wasn't, you didn't get that feeling of just teamwork and they're all working together and stuff. It was a one-man show, and you kind of sensed it in the early stages of the tournament too, with how RJ Barrett and SJ had to take over to win games. And they just crumbled. And I want to say, what do you think about the height thing? Because that was something that was a big deal going into the tournament. But that game, yes, Rudy Gobert played 4 minutes, and Victor Wembanyama shot 2 of 10.
Yeah.
So it wasn't their big men. It was the other guys. And
yeah, I think some of those other guys, though, it still comes down to size in some regard. I can't remember how many times I've talked about it on this show. I've written about it. I thought the lack of quality bigs and lack of size would ultimately doom this team, and I do think that was a big part of it. Sure, Wemby didn't dominate and Gobert barely played, but defensively, obviously, Wemby dominated. His presence in the paint mucked up their offense. Yeah. There's not much you can do about that. But when you think of that Canadian bigs rotation of Dwight Powell, Kelly Olynyk, Kem Birch, and Trey Lyles, as an entire, not just at the center spot, but as a bigs rotation, and you look at how France really dominated that game. Guys like Lesort and Yabusele dominating physically against guys like Olynyk and Lyles and Birch and Powell. Brooks starts on Wemby and does as good a job as you can ask an undersized guy to do on Wemby, but it's what's Dwight Powell doing now? Because he's not quick enough to guard the forwards. He's not offensively skilled enough to do anything on the other end. So it's okay, great. He's rebounding and screening. Those are important, but they just didn't get enough from their bigs. And the reason, I know everyone in Canada, or most people in Canada, are looking at the foul situation, the free throw disparity, the whistles. Were there some bad whistles and bad calls? Yes. But you know why France shot that many more free throws? Because no Canadian forward or big could guard Yabusele and Lesort.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that was the problem. But I will say, that was an expected problem. We knew that was going to be this team's undoing at some point.
Right.
The biggest flaw in yesterday's game, the thing that I think ended up taking them down, and I hate to put it on one guy, is how poorly Jamal Murray played. Not just in that game, but in this tournament. Look, you can see the numbers there. He was awful in this tournament. Canada was supposed to have the best backcourt in this tournament. And instead, Isaiah Cordigné almost matched Jamal Murray's entire tournament output in one game against Canada. Jamal Murray, coming off the bench, was supposed to balance this team and allow him to dominate inferior competition. Instead, Canada's bench stunk, and Jamal Murray had the second worst plus-minus on the team. There's just no way to sugarcoat this. Jamal Murray, being as bad as he was, their second best player being arguably their weakest link, sunk this team.
Yeah.
And the same way that we credit him for his big game performances in the NBA in Denver, how great of a playoff performer he is, arguably being the best never all-star in the league right now, and he deserves all that praise. The same way we praise him for that, we can fairly criticize him for this. He was awful in this tournament. Maybe it was the calf issue. Maybe he was coming off the bench. Maybe it was the unresolved contract. I don't know what it was, but he was bad. And your second best player can't be that bad. if he had played up to his standards, Canada could have overcome some of the flaws we already knew were there.
Yeah.
With him playing like that, they just had no chance. I mean, you've got people out there calling him a Jokic merchant. Like, we can throw it up. My guy Streaker on Twitter, one of the most hilarious basketball follows out there, and one of my favorite ones, put up a great tweet. It's hard to, as a Canadian, it's maybe like mildly offensive in Canuckland over here, but it was just such a great tweet about Jamal Murray without Jokic. It's just Tim Hortonway Jr. Yeah. But again, is it fair for 2 weeks in international ball to override everything he's done in the NBA? Obviously not, but this is what happens when you play that poorly without Jokic.
Yeah, it's so funny too, because I think until this point of his career, Jamal Murray, like people say it on Twitter all the time, he was the big moment merchant. It's like Jamal Murray on a Wednesday night in November against the Pistons will have 15 points. And then, NBA Finals, biggest stage, he just puts up crazy numbers. So you'd expect somewhere like this for him to just go crazy, and he wouldn't, and he couldn't. And I was kind of looking at it, I was breaking it down, and honestly, I think, come next Olympics, I think he'll be even better adjusted, obviously, having this. But
if he's there.
If he's there, that's a good point. Yeah, maybe they'll overlook him after this. But the way I looked at it, it's not something I expected entering the tournament, but I feel like maybe more people should have, is just you look at when he's at his best and how they've built the Denver Nuggets as well. Jokic, he can play alongside a great player like Jokic, of course, but he plays the 5. The guys that have played guard around Jamal Murray, Gary Harris, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, it's going to be, Christian Brown this season. It's not guys who are demanding the ball whatsoever. Nobody like SGA. I know they weren't out there together all the time, but still, he's never really played in an elite backcourt. And he needs his touches and all that, and so this is a perfect example of the fact that, he's not the type of player that you can just plug and play, and he can get in and get his shots and get out. He really needs to get some shots up, and didn't have that opportunity, and he looked bad.
Yeah, and it's such a shame because, like I said, I mean, I was being a little tongue-in-cheek when I said, if he'll be there in 4 years, but I don't even mean it just because, he had one bad tournament, they're not going to want him. Like, he's still, at worst, Canada's third best player right now, probably still, on average, their second best player, all things considered, but 4 years is a long time in sports, man, and it's a guy that's had some injuries. He was, a little banged up right now. There's no guarantee he'll be in tip-top shape in the summer 4 years from now. Canada will have to work to qualify for that Olympics. Just this was a golden opportunity to at least medal, to at least play for a medal, get to the medal rounds, get to the semis. And I think what's so disappointing about it is, if we could have come out of this game and said, Canada played their best, and their best guys played their best, and they just lost to a good French team in a one, because that happens sometimes in a single elimination game, crap happens. But I don't think we're coming out of it saying like that. I think we're coming out of it saying the second most talented team in this tournament lost in the quarterfinals while most of their players underperformed.
Yeah. There's no part of that game, especially considering the fact they beat this team pretty handily in the warm-up game. I know it's a friendly, it's a warm-up, whatever, but no, that was far from Canada's A game. And honestly, outside of Shea, maybe RJ Barrett, everybody started the game bad, and it just gradually got worse. Yeah. At least those guys, they didn't start great, but they got better. They got to take a long look in the mirror. And the thing about, as Canadians, we haven't experienced this really, especially with the basketball yet. But the thing with the Olympics, you got to wait 4 years. That's the thing I couldn't get out of my head watching that game yesterday is all this waiting, all this time for Canada to field the best team ever, years and years of great Canadians playing well in the NBA. And we got to wait another 4 years. It's a long time. So.
It is. And you think Shea was awesome, obviously. RJ, I think, really shown as a secondary scorer, efficient, consistent. I think Dort was great, Herculean effort across the board. Yeah. Brooks shot the ball poorly against France, and his decision-making offensively is always going to be what it is. But I think by and large, I don't think Canada could have asked much more from Dylan Brooks for the tournament as a whole. After those 4 guys, the other 7 guys who played, or the 8 guys who played, maybe Kem Birch, you can say, gave you what you thought you could get from it. Other than that, I think everyone underperformed.
For sure.
Nembhard was a hit and miss, but not great. Murray, we talked about, was their most disappointing player. Nikhil Alexander-Walker didn't hit a single shot. Yeah. Has been slumping since the conference finals. The bigs I mentioned, I don't know, man. It's just hoping Zach Edey is there the next cycle, and hoping he develops some of these young guys coming up, Mathurin and Sharp, and the talent's still coming. Canada will still be the second most talented team in the world, most likely, over the next few years. It's just a matter of, like you said, now you got to wait 4 years for the next Olympics. You don't know if all guys will be available come that time. It's
yeah, it was a perfect storm for them, and I was excited for this for about like a year.
Yeah,
and that was just a very rude awakening, I'd say. So
we waited 24 years. We were excited about it all year. Gone in a flash.
Yeah, there it goes.
Not going anywhere anytime soon. Segue from Olympic ball to NBA ball here. Lauri Markkanen in Utah. We haven't talked NBA in a couple weeks because the Olympics have been dominating, and also there just hasn't been much news out there. But Lauri Markkanen, who was arguably the biggest name on the reported trade block, was supposed to headline 2025 free agency, signs a 5-year, $238 million extension in Utah, keeps him under contract through 2029. I think it adds like $218 or $220 million extra on top of what he was already going to earn this year.
Yeah, not bad.
Also, the timing of his deal, the extension, means he is ineligible to be traded for the entire 2024-2025 season.
Right.
So taking all that into consideration, we can maybe get to the Utah side of it if we have time at the end of the conversation, but Lauri Markkanen off the board. Who is the next big name to get traded in the NBA?
I think there's still some guys. There's a lot of guys in a lot of weird spots. It feels like teams getting ready to rebuild or in the midst of rebuilds, and they still have a couple pieces hanging on. You look at the Bulls, Zach LaVine. I think that's probably the best candidate, just given where they're at and other teams that could use him. I obviously look at Brandon Ingram too. That situation, it's self-explanatory, really. His deal's about to be up. They're not going to pay him. They've got younger guys. So I think those two are the names that really jump out to me. We can go down the list if you'd like. And there's a lot of guys who you could absolutely see it. But I think those two, it feels like a given that they'll be dealt. And there's some teams that really need them. And yeah, I think it should be exciting. It's not as great of a. I mean, the big names have kind of gone already, Paul George and such. But yeah. I'd say those two, and then we could play around with the rest of the field because I think some other names could still go. If you want to touch on those, like Jimmy Butler.
Yes, let's play around with the rest of the field and have some fun here. Okay, in terms of LaVine and Ingram, I'm with you. I think those are the two obvious ones. Where it's like if we're being logical, those are probably the two biggest names that'll get traded next. Yeah. But at the same time, Zach LaVine, all those injury issues, $138 million left on that deal. I don't know who's giving up a ton for him. It's going to be tough. Ingram, opposite end of the spectrum, where he's an expiring. It's not that he has a lot of money owed to him, but he's an expiring. And also, Ingram's game isn't the easiest to fit. He's not exactly a plug-and-play guy, right? So those are two guys who I think logically it makes the most sense that they'll be next to move, but I think it's easier said than done to actually move them and find teams willing to give stuff up for them. So then you said, let's play with the field, have some fun. Names like Trae Young and Karl Anthony Towns come up. Trae, obviously, everyone thought the Hawks might trade him and go full rebuild when they got the number 1 pick, end up trading DeJounte Murray. Part of also the reason why everyone thinks Ingram's gone in New Orleans. Yeah. But I feel like Atlanta will at least want to see what it looks like right now with DeJounte out of the way, see if they can build around Trae and Riza Shea. Cat, the Timberwolves want to get out of that second apron eventually, but in the meantime, last year proved, like, this team's a contender. I don't think they're trading Cat anytime soon unless things go off the rails. Like, they're a contender. So then we get into some really interesting names. And again, there's no reporting out there saying these guys are on the block. But, like, let's talk Julius Randle, for example. Interested to know your thoughts. Because the way I see it is, look, the Knicks are now built to win. There's pressure on them to win. They're a more expensive team. They're going to continue to get more expensive. They've used up a lot of the draft assets that they had to get Bridges. Now you look at the core is more like Brunson, OG, Bridges, maybe Hart and DiVincenzo, the Villanova boys in it there. Again, I think they're going to start the season, see what they have, and try to win as presently constructed. But if things don't go the way the Knicks hoped, or they're not quite at that level they thought they were, and they have to make one more move, I feel like Randall's the odd guy out here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's the odd guy out in a couple ways. Obviously, he's not a Villanova alum, so there's that. But no, I agree. It's funny because once they started constructing this Villanova team on the Knicks, I thought the Bridges thing was in my mind for a while, and I thought maybe it would be something like a Randall for Bridges swap. Get Randall out, bring Bridges in, and you keep all your assets and stuff like they were. But they didn't do that. They just brought him in for all those draft picks. So, I
don't think the Nets wanted any part of Randall for Bridges. Yeah,
1,000%. So, I absolutely could see it. I don't think, it's going to be a weird fit no matter what. You have Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby and Julius Randle and also, I guess, Mitchell. They're going to have a center in there, too. They've just got so many similar pieces to the point where they ship Julius Randle out. I don't think they're losing that much on the floor because they just have so many guys. So, I don't exactly I don't know where he would end up.
Well, that's the problem. He's another one of these guys where, don't get me wrong, he's a good player, durable guy. He's going to play a ton for you.
Yeah.
Great regular season player. We know his issues in the playoffs. He's not a plug-and-play guy.
No.
And I think it helped him being separated from R.J. Barrett because I think there was a lot of duplication there. But I just think with the ball in Brunson's hands, the kind of 3-and-D stuff OG does, even Mikal Bridges, who can take on a little bit more ball handling responsibilities or dominate more. Randall, it's going to be a tough fit. And it doesn't mean it can't work. Like I said, I'm just throwing a hypothetical out there. If it doesn't work, I feel like he's the odd guy out. Jimmy Butler in Miami, to me, is a fascinating one because, we've all talked for years about how this was the perfect marriage of superstar and team, right? Jimmy Butler and all that he brings with Heat culture, with Pat Riley's Miami Heat. It was so perfect. But if you've been listening to Pat Riley talk this summer, it seems like there's maybe some cracks in that foundation starting to show. Jimmy Butler's only got 1 year left on his deal. Then he's got a player option for 50-something million. He's older now, too. A lot of miles on that body, a lot of injuries. I don't think the Heat are just willing, for no reason, going to throw him a max extension here. He's going to have to earn it, and I think it's going to be tough for him to earn it at his age. And that's going to create some friction. Jimmy Butler and friction, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
He's another one of those teams. If things get off to a rocky start, would you be shocked that Jimmy Butler's elsewhere?
No, absolutely not. It's true. It's as hard-nosed as he's been and as he is, he's jumped ship a couple times. Not to say it's all his fault, but the Timberwolves, we saw what happened. The Sixers, we saw what happened. It kind of caught me by surprise. It shouldn't have, because the way that Heat's team has been constructed for the last few years, it's they were getting to the finals, but after last year, especially where they just fizzled out, you start to look at it and be like, what do they even have here? They've got Bam, they've got Jimmy Butler, and that's about it. So I actually thought, we were talking about Brandon Ingram, I thought that could be a spot maybe where he goes, because they absolutely need a third guy if they want to stick with Jimmy Butler. But I would say, I feel confident in saying if they don't bring in and try and trade for a piece like that, I think he's as good as gone, to be honest. And they're not going to want to pay him all that money, too, especially if he has another season like he just did, where they don't have that much success. And then the antics a bit when it got to the postseason. I know there was some reports on Pat Riley being frustrated with him, and he was saying some comments and stuff. Didn't play in the playoffs for a good amount of that series. It only can work for so long, kind of his edginess and Heat culture. And, if they have a repeat season, I don't see why he'd stick around.
Okay, then the really fun one. And again, there's no reporting out there about this. It's just, we're having some fun here.
Yeah.
Kevin Durant could have a next chapter, a new chapter.
My next chapter.
Another next chapter. This one is simply that the Suns are in salary cap hell like no other team in the NBA. They are in second apron hell. And their owner, Matt Ishbia, seems willing to pay the price, willing to deal with the future consequences. They've traded every pick till God knows when already to construct this team. But, and I actually like the Tyus Jones pickup. Love Tyus Jones. That was a big pickup on a minimum. But still, I still don't think this team is one of the even 3 or 4 best teams in the West, let alone in the entire league.
Definitely not.
Wouldn't pick them to win the title or anything close to it. Even them, if things go a little off the rails, or if this team just realizes, hey, we're not actually competing for a title here while we completely mortgage our future and give ourselves no chance to do anything else, they're going to have to look at a shakeup. Devin Booker's still the future there. He's the cornerstone. You're not moving him. between Durant and Beal, Durant's not only by far the better player, but by far the more tradable player because Beal's got the extra year in his deal. He's more injury prone. He's not as good. He's a defenseless guard. Like Durant would be their path to getting out of this purgatory a little bit. So give me what are we 1.5% chance here that Durant gets traded this season? 10%? Is that way too high?
It's tough because in NBA especially, with how these super teams are built year in and year out, super teams I should say, you never ever expect or I really want to see that move happen, but it makes a lot of sense for the Suns. And it's crazy because, 1 year they're mortgaging everything that they have to bring in Bradley Beal and go into win now mode. And then the next year, you're like, oh, they need to shake this up completely if they want to have any pulse over the next 5 to 10 years because everything's gone. So I like it a lot from just a business perspective, really. Like for them to kind of extend the longevity of Devin Booker, hopefully, see what they can get out of Bradley Beal. So I think there's definitely merit behind it. Whether or not the Suns organization is comfortable trading Kevin Durant is a different story, but I definitely wouldn't throw that to the side that much right now.
Yeah, that'd be incredible if Kevin Durant's on the move again. Okay, before we get out of here, I know they're not the sexy name or team in this mix, but they are the team that actually just did something, the Utah Jazz. Quick thoughts on the Markkanen extension and kind of where you see the Jazz in the near term.
Yeah, I like it. Obviously, I think Markkanen's a very solid player, and he's been super good for them for the last while now. He's really kind of blossomed into a new player there. I like where they're headed, and I think this is a great lockdown. I know they have a lot of other pieces on that team that kind of fit the mold of him in terms of, where they're at in their careers and having something to prove, and they have it all turned out that way. You look at a guy like Colin Sexton, Taylor Horton-Tucker, a bunch of different names there that are in that spot. So I think, you lock down their best player and then you build around him with these young guys that they brought in. Keontae George, they just had a great draft with Cody Williams and those guys. I like the move. A lot. I think it's smarter than dealing him. I didn't really love the packages that I was seeing floating around, like the Warriors and stuff. So I think it's a smart move from Utah and keep him there for a while and just let him continue to develop.
Yeah, I think it was like from my perspective a no-brainer to keep him, a player like that around. He's still only 27. They've locked him up for the remainder of his prime. The only reason I find it a little confusing is just because if you kind of look at the way Utah's operated the last couple of years, they've wanted to be bad. They've wanted to tank. Mm-hmm. Markkanen's explosion a couple of years ago was the biggest reason they didn't end up tanking because he made them too good.
Yeah.
And they were in the play-in race, and they pulled the plug. They traded a bunch of guys anyway, expiring deals, whatever, to, expedite the losing down the stretch. So it ended up being like a half-hearted tank. Going to last season, kind of the same thing happened. They're competitive at the start. They end up pulling the plug, but they do it too late because Markkanen keeps them competitive. Now they're going into another season where all reports indicate they're still eyeing that 2025 draft. Cooper Flagg and the highly touted class around him. And I get all that. I guess my confusion is just like, okay, what is the path here? Because if you wanted to go all in on the draft, then maybe you should have moved him at some point over the last year or two, added even more to that already crazy amount of draft capital and trade capital you have, and just really bottom out and go, guns blazing at the bottom, bank on the lottery, see what happens. The thing with they've kind of proven that this formula with Markkanen, some of their young pieces, and Will Hardy, who's a great young coach, is going to keep them competitive. Right. But at a kind of middle of the pack. So it's like, are you going to try to be like a 35-ish win team that doesn't do anything this year with Markkanen? Are you going to pull the plug early again, which seems like a waste? They've got, I think, 6 guys from the last 2 drafts. Walker Kessler from a few drafts ago. They want to be looking at the 2025 draft. I like this on one hand, but I also look at it as like a year from now, are we going to be asking the same questions once he's eligible to be traded again? Are we going to be saying, all right, well, now they got to move Markkanen because he doesn't really fit with this timeline? I think it's good in a vacuum, but I do think it could lead to more questions a year from now, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because, hey, you could end up a year from now when he's eligible, flip him then, and still get a big haul from him. I still believe the Spurs should try to move heaven and earth to pair him in a front court with Wembanyama, and the Spurs have all the picks in the world too. So I think it leads to a lot of questions, not just in Utah, but for some teams looking at Markkanen, just not for the next year.
Yeah. It's a good point. It's like they've kind of set that over the last course of maybe 2 years, they've set themselves up for this 2025 class that has been, widely regarded as one of the better ones for a while now. They're moving in the direction where they've got all these young pieces and stuff, but they're just a bit too good to be a real suitor in that draft. Some way, somehow, if they just had an auto top 3 pick, you'd be like, this team's in an awesome spot.
Yeah.
Look at all these pieces they have. But yeah, you're right. I think that the West is really good. And
That's
you look at like 1 through 10. I don't think they're cracking in there, so they'll have that on their side. But it is a good point. It's a bit too good of a player for the direction they appear to be headed in.
Yeah. I like this, though. I almost forgot what it was like to talk about some NBA news
I know.
The last few weeks. So thank you, Utah, and Lauri
Yes.
Markkanen for that. Almost made me forget about the sadness of Team Canada that we had to discuss to start the show. Programming note, probably not here next week. We'll be back in a couple weeks, and hopefully by then we've got even more NBA news to talk about, maybe some WNBA stuff. We'll see who the gold medal champion is by then. I think we know who it'll be. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to keep following us here at The Unfiltered Show. For Levi Smith, I'm Joseph Casciaro. Thanks for watching.